without that. So I went back. Now, some of you would think, well, just get your cell phone out and text your mom or your dad, and they could tell you what your Social Security number was. That'd be easy, right? Or you could call it. No, I had to go back to the dorm. Well, I went to the Student Center, I think. Got on the payphone there, put my dime in, push 0, collect call. You know, of course, it's going to be collect. My mother said, I'll have to go find it and get it out for you. But anyway, long and short, I hadn't made preparation. I didn't know you needed a Social Security number to cash a check. I mean, this was 1974. The banks I banked with still had blank checks laying on the desk there. If you went in there and you had a bank account there and you didn't bring a check with you, you could write it in, and even if you didn't know your bank number, they would look it up for you and they would handle that for you. But that's a little different than it is today. This morning you need to be prepared. If you're going to study with someone, if you're going to get to heaven, don't you need to know the Bible? How well this morning would you say you and I know the Bible? How prepared are we? Somebody asked us what today's a simple question, what's your Social Security number? I dare say almost everyone in here could recite it back because we've had to use it so much. But how about a simple Bible question? If someone asks us a simple Bible question, do we know the answer? Well, Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 12 tells us that if we don't continually study. Now, a lot of us in here, we're blessed to grow up in the Lord's church. We're blessed to grow up with parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and others that talk to us about the Bible a lot. And we may have learned a lot of Bible. But you know what happens if you don't continue to study it and to read it? Well, guess what happens? All of a sudden, all the preparation that you did in the past begins to fade away. Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 12. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first principles, the oracles of God. And you have come to need milk and not solid food. Thanks, Tommy. Got my monitor working back up here. We're back in business. We need to be making preparation today because guess what? Somebody's going to want to know from you, hopefully, by the way you live about Jesus. What are you going to say? Well, I'm happy. And Ken and Rick are happy if you call one of us and say, I'd like for you to study with this person. That'd be great. But what do you think that person thinks about you? You said, oh, you really ought to study because I've been a Christian for 20 years and I love the Lord and I love the church and I want you to know about it too. And they said, well, let's talk about it. Well, I'll tell you, I think you'd do better talking to one of the elders or to my preacher. What do you think they think about you and your commitment? How prepared are you going to be? What kind of example of mentor, of leader, of encourager for them you can be if we don't study? So let's remember what's at stake, make preparation, and remember this. Evangelism affects our salvation. You ever think about what if Jesus really meant what he said? What if he really meant what he said in the Great Commission? What if he really was talking to you this morning? He was talking to you and saying, go out into your world and teach the gospel. To those people in your world, you don't have to go to the Philippines or to India or to even other places in our country. But what if he was serious about going to your world? The people you see every day. The people you talk to. You remember that song? You never mentioned him to me. You saw me every day. You knew I was astray, but you never mentioned him to me. Not one of my favorite songs to sing because I have a hard time singing without a lump in my throat. Without thinking about people in my life that I could have. But that's not the important part of that song. The important part of that song is to think, you know what? Not those in the past. But you know what's going to happen to me today and tomorrow if I continue to live? I'm going to run into people today and tomorrow, every day of my life, that I could be a positive influence, that I could share the story of Jesus about. Because, see, evangelism not only affects them, but it affects me. Remember Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 17 and 18? Son of man, I've made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Therefore, hear a word from my mouth and give warning from me. Give them warning from me. When I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give them no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked ways, to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity. Do you get the picture? If there's somebody that's lost, and you know about it, and you don't say anything to them, they're going to be lost. That's the way it's going to be. That's what the Bible says. But then he says, but his blood I will require at your hands. That becomes kind of chilling. All of a sudden, it's not just, well, if I don't do evangelism, if I'm not interested in leading people to Jesus, it's just going to those poor souls, bless their hearts, they're going to lose their soul and go to hell. They're going to be lost if they don't. Somebody else doesn't teach them. Maybe somebody else will teach them. But they come back to Ezekiel the prophet, and the Lord told him to say this, his blood I'll require at your hand. Acts chapter 20, verse 26 to 27. Paul there is saying to him, he said, guess what? I can testify to you this day that I'm innocent of the blood of all men. Wait a minute, Paul. It says if you didn't teach somebody, if you didn't tell somebody, didn't warn somebody, you're going to be guilty. That blood's going to be on you, your head. No, Paul said, I'm not that way. For I've not shunned to declare to you the whole counsel of God. Maybe we need to start praying this song. We don't sing it very often, much anymore, but lead me to some soul today. Oh, teach me, Lord, just what to say. Friends of mine are lost in sin and cannot find their way. You've got to remember not only what's at stake, us getting to heaven, getting others to heaven around us, getting our family to heaven. Make preparation for those times. And then remember that evangelism affects others, but it also affects me. It affects my salvation. And then finally, stop making excuses. We've got more excuses for not doing evangelism, for not doing what the Lord said than Moses had in Exodus 3 and 4. Moses had every excuse in the world, didn't he? They won't listen to him. Well, here's a miracle. You show them what happened to your hand. Throw your rod down. Look what's going to happen. Well, I know, but, and basically, God, I can imagine Moses increased his stammering and stuttering. God, but I'm not a very good speaker. It's all right, you go. Aaron's going to go with you. Basically, Moses finally came back and said, God, just send anybody. Send Aaron, but don't send me. Don't ask me to do this. What's our excuse this morning? What's our excuse for those that we love, for those that we have some influence, we have some contact with, we have a relationship with? What's our excuse for not talking to them about coming back to the Lord, about giving their life to Jesus Christ in obedience and having their sins washed away, being added to the body? What's our excuse? Well, I think there's several things that come up. Number one is fear. I think we are worried about, what if I say the wrong thing? Yeah, what if I say the wrong thing and I mess it up? What if what I say offends them and they don't? Our relationship's awkward then. Well, I think it's in Ivan Stewart's book on soul winning. He said, tact is good, but contact is better. Be willing to reach out to talk to people. Be willing to be concerned about people. Because, see, Revelation 21 and 8 is not very kind to those of us that said, well, to stand before God and say, well, God, I would have done more evangelism, but I was scared. I was a little afraid. I had fear about what it might do, how it might affect them, how it might be. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, those don't sound too bad. I mean, I was a little scared. I didn't really believe in exactly what God said, but I was trying to, sort of. But then look who they're lumped in with. The abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Folks, we can't be scared. We can't worry about what it's going to do to that relationship with that person. If you're living the life that you ought to be living, they're going to see Jesus in you anyway. They're probably waiting for you and expecting you to say something to them, to give them something. Tell them what it's all about. Fear is one reason. Another reason is bad experiences. Oh, but I tried to teach somebody one time, and it just went terrible. I tried to talk to them, and all of a sudden they started asking me about this and about that, and I didn't have a clue. I didn't know where to turn. I felt like a fool, and so I just gave up. Well, sometimes there are going to be bad experiences. Maybe it goes back to the lack of preparation. But I'm going to tell you something in my experiences. A lot of times, I've faced questions that I didn't come to that Bible study prepared for. I didn't sit down and drink a cup of coffee and we got into a Bible study to be prepared for. But guess what? Almost always, if I've convinced and I've built that relationship with that person, just in a few minutes sometimes, if I really care about you, and I'm so happy to find somebody that wants to talk about the Bible and talk about Jesus, and then to take that and to come back and to say, you know what, that's a really good, let me study that. Let's get together. You study that too. Let's take a look at that. And how about Tuesday afternoon about 4 o'clock, 4:30, get off work. How about Tuesday afternoon, let's sit down and let's talk about what we found about it. You want to do that? Yeah, it sounds a good idea. I mean, I'd never thought about it either. It's something I want to study some more. So we go back in and we do that. I've had people say that people mistreated them when they tried to have a Bible study with them. We're just ugly to them. There have been a lot of people that have been mistreated by the church. The church, people, Christians, mistreated people. And they quit the church. You ever heard of that happening? Well, if you haven't, you just don't know, because the 18 years I've been here, guess what? There's a lot of empty seats in the pews where people got mad because somebody didn't do it the way they wanted it, or somebody mistreated, or somebody said something to me that I didn't like. And so a Christian quits the church. I want to ask you this just to think about. Think about how many times Christ was mistreated, but all he did was increase his love for the church. It wasn't easy. Remember what believers, even faithful Christians, have done through the years to the church, to Jesus' body, and yet all he does is increase his love for us. So let's not let bad experiences be our excuse. Then I want you to start thinking about not making excuses, because there's people that say, well, we don't have enough training. I just don't know enough about the Bible to talk about the Bible. I just can't get enough of it. Well, I can understand that, because we do need to know something about it. But do you know how you learn things about it? You learn about it by caring about it, by getting involved in it. I'll be very honest, and you know this. If you look at Facebook, guess what makes up about 40% of what's on Facebook or more? You know what it is. Pictures of children and grandchildren. Now, why can we find time to put up pictures of our children and our grandchildren. Why can we be, it's so easy for us to do that. If somebody came up to me after service and said, hey, what's going on with Elliot? Man, I'll tell you what, she's doing in the fourth grade, she's doing this, she's doing that, she's playing soccer. I can tell you a lot of things about her. Why? Because I love her, because I'm interested in her, because it matters to me. I want you to think about what you can tell people about the Lord and about the church. Does it matter to us? Does it make any difference to me? Do I love the Lord as much as I love my grandchildren? Do I love the Lord as much as I love my children? Well, that's not the same thing. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. That relationship with that child or that grandchild, you know how long it lasts? As long as there's breath in your lungs. Because, see, one of these days, you're just going to be a memory. But if you've taught them about Jesus, if you've led them to Jesus, if you said, I'm going to make my first concern the biggest thing at stake for me. If you've got children in your home right now, there's nothing else that matters except getting your children to heaven. If you're focused on anything else, you're aimed in the wrong direction. You're missing what you need to do. Make preparation today. Begin every day and continue every day. To say the first thing I want to know, yeah, I'm glad that they're smart, and I'm glad they're learning in school, and I'm glad they made the honor roll, and I'm glad they did this, and glad they did that, and glad they accomplished this in baseball and softball and basketball and soccer and whatever other sports they're involved in. I'm glad they're doing all these great things. But I want them to get to heaven. Mom and Dad, that needs to be the number one thing your children know. If somebody said, what does my mother want from me? If the answer is anything other than get to heaven, keep working. Don't get discouraged, but keep working. Keep working. That's what matters. Because it affects you too. Because, see, those of us who are blessed by God to have children, guess what? God put us as a watchman over a house that's really important. I've got to watch out for my children. I've got to watch out for my grandchildren now. Those of us that are blessed with children, that responsibility never ends till they die. I'm not going to stand there and watch them and say, well, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to upset the relationship with them. And I know it doesn't need to be that way, folks. It doesn't take any training. Talk about your grandchildren. Talk about your children. What it takes is a commitment. You love them. You care about them. They matter to you. Take that same attitude and transfer it over to the church. I love the Lord. I love the church. I'm proud of the church. I want people to know about the church. I want people to know about Jesus. You'll be amazed at how things change. I want to encourage you this morning to remember our mission. We've got one job. We've got one job. That's to get to heaven and get everybody we can take with us there. That's all. That's our job. You mean it's not for me to earn $1 million? I've already done that. You didn't know I was a millionaire. Well, when you get 65 and they send you you look at your Social Security earnings, look how much you've earned in the last 40 plus years, you probably find out you're a millionaire too. Millionaire. But that's not what God said, Don, your mission is. Got a nice house? Got a nice house. But that's not what my mission is. Got a little bit set aside, a little bit planned ahead. Great. But that's not what your mission is. Folks, let's get the first things first. Let's get first things first. First of all, the church, it's not a country club. Church is not a country club. It's not a place where we can come in and sit and everything goes my way and everything's fine and everything's perfect and everything's just like I like it and it goes just the way I want it to and I'm very comfortable. I don't have to do anything except, I guess, pay my dues a little bit and then I'm there. It's not a country club. It's an intensive care unit for me, for you. A few years ago, my dad was very ill. Spent a lot of time in intensive care. Guess what happened a lot of times in intensive care units? Something happens that everybody gets excited. And there's something wrong with the patient. All of a sudden, it started beep, 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 beep. And all of a sudden, nurses, doctors, everybody converges. Why? Well, something bad's going on. We're worried about that person in there in that bed. Worried about that person in ICU. Today, the Lord's church is like an ICU unit. We're all in there. Some things are different than others. There's some needs that are different for me that are different for you. There are some things that the time I'm challenged with spiritually that you're not. Sometimes that you need a hug more than I do. Sometimes I need a hug more than you do. But the point is, we're all in there. And God says, I'll take care of you. But you know what God did? God loved us enough to say, not only will I take care of you, but I'll give you a family that will take care of you. A group around. Now, guess what I've run into from time to time? I've run into people in the ICU unit, and I ran into it a lot last year, and so did you. But there'd be a sign hanging up on the ICU unit door. No visitors. I've had people tell me that, well, because of what's going on, we really prefer that nobody come over right now. And there was a lot of that during COVID. People were bunkered down in their homes and things like that. And that was okay, I guess. But you know what? A lot of us do the same thing in the Lord's church. We're in ICU. We're all in this together, trying to get to heaven. But we put up barriers around, put a sign up, said, no visitors. Don't come inside. I don't want you to come in to me. I'm certainly not going to have the lights go off and the buzzer go off and let you know to come see me. Sometimes that's because we're not here. We're not present. We're not a part of the family. We stay away, and then we wonder why we're not noticed. I'll be very honest. Last Wednesday night, I don't want to embarrass him or make him prideful or anything, I sent Ivan a text about a quarter after 7. You know why? He wasn't here. He got caught in a hayfield, had some things coming on with the rain coming and things, had to take care of. But if Ivan hadn't responded, I'd have probably called somebody and started looking for him. Do you know why? Because Ivan's here. I know where he wants to be. If he's not here, there's something going on beyond his control. Story was told a few years ago about a farmer that flipped his tractor over on Wednesday night. They called him and didn't get an answer and began looking for him that evening. They found the tractor was turned over on him. They said, well, we knew if you weren't in service, something bad had to be going on. How many of us would be that way? If we just didn't show up, didn't call anybody, didn't text, didn't do anything, if we just didn't show up, what would be the response that most of us would have if we look around the ICU? Well, she comes if she wants to anyway. He comes if he's okay, if it's convenient, he's here. If it's not, he's not. They're probably okay though, because let's face it, we called them every time they weren't here. We'd wear the paint off the button on our phone trying to call them. Folks, we need to be people of God who understand what our mission is. That's to save each other, to save ourselves in saving each other. To do that, got to be a part of the family. Got to be a part of the family. That means I'm going to be one that says, you know what? First and foremost in my life, when my children and my grandchildren, when they remember me, they'll remember one thing about me. I knew what mattered in this life. I knew what was in stake. They saw me making preparation to live forever. They heard me as I encouraged them to live forever. This morning, God doesn't want excuses. God said, I want you to do what I asked you to do, what I've told you to do. Because if you do that, I've got a place prepared for you. This morning, if you're not a Christian, how do you become one? Well, don't let me tell you. Go to God's Word. You look through the Bible. You begin to see, what did they do in the book of Acts when the church was established? How did those people go from being lost to being saved? Well, very simple. Every one of them heard the story of Jesus Christ. They knew about Jesus. They were told about Jesus. And then when that happened, that made an impression on them that they thought about, and they said, you know what? I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. There's no question about that. And that belief then moved them, and you see as we go through to repentance. Repentance means I change my mind, and then I'm going to change my life. I'm going to start living for Him. You begin to see those cases appear over and over in the book of Acts. And then you see one other thing that happened. Whether it was out in the middle of the desert to a man from Africa, whether it was a jailer in the city of Philippi, whether it was a Roman soldier, but as soon as they were told about Jesus and believed, repented of their sins, they shared with Jesus in His death, His burial, and His resurrection. And their sins were washed away. They overcame the death of sin by having their sins washed away in the watery grave of baptism. This morning, that's all Jesus wants you to do. If you're not a Christian, He wants you to begin today walking the walk with Him. He wants you to start on your mission where you can look around and you can look at everybody else, because every one of us in here is in the ICU unit. Maybe for different things at different times. We're all in intensive care. From time to time, we're all going to need sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes it's going to be just someone sitting out, looking in the room, watching over the room, checking your numbers. Sometimes it's going to be, though, there's going to be a lot of buzzers going off and a blue light going off, and they're coding. Got to get in there right now. Let's make sure we're alert and ready to help others. We help others by being prepared ourselves. This morning, if you're not a Christian, the Lord needs you. Not only does the Lord need you, but someone else around you needs you. If you are a Christian, you say, you know what, I kind of walked out of the hospital. I pulled the needles out of my arm, took the oxygen off. I walked away from God. I'm on my own out here, and I realized, guess what? I'm not doing very well. I need to come back home. If we can help you with that this morning, why don't you come while we stand, while we sing our invitation song. Let us help you.
I am resolved no longer to linger, charmed by the world's delight. Things that are higher, things that are lower, these have allured my sight. I will hasten to Him, hasten so glad and free.
You're here this morning. I hope you'll be back tonight at 6 o'clock. Our young men are going to be conducting our services tonight. So moms and dads, make sure you've checked the board. Make sure you ask your young'uns. You got your song ready, you got your scripture ready, you got your stuff ready. They're counting on you. They're in the pediatric ICU right now. They need you. So step up and take care of them. help get them to heaven. Look forward to seeing you tonight at 6 o'clock. If there's nothing else, we'll have a verse of a song.